Hi, I'm Scott. Welcome back to Canard Boulevard. We're back in the hangar on a nice sunny day. We've got some parts in, we got some work to do. So the part that I've been waiting for quite some time has arrived. And this is the custom heat shroud or muff that will be going on this exhaust pipe right here. Hopefully the design that I did for this is correct. We'll fit it and see if it works. So this actually comes apart. It's a clamshell and the heat will be, or the cold air will be going in here and then the hot air will be coming out of here. There is a restrictor plate on here that restricts how much airflow can actually go so that we can control how much heat is actually getting added to the air. I have quite a far run for the duct work to go into the airplane. I don't know if we'll be using that or not, but well, we'll start with it in place and see how it goes. So we're going to start by pulling off these two screw clamps, these worm clamps here, and see if it'll fit. I did have this actually custom made. Normally the two ends are straight down and they're in a bit and the clamps go on the outside. But after doing a whole lot of measurements, I decided that in order to fit my application, that this is the design that I needed to have made. So if you look at the inside, there's actually copper windings around aluminum rods. The copper windings actually come in contact with the exhaust, conduct heat into these rods. The air moves in and around these rods, and because there's so much more surface area, it picks up way more heat than if we were just to blow air around the exhaust like most shrouds actually function. So this will be going on here, and this will go on the bottom. Let's see if we can figure out how we're going to get this to fit in here. And I may have to undo this one pipe to get this to fit. Yep, that's going to have to come out.
Of course, if I had paid attention when I was doing this originally, I wouldn't be disassembling the baffling that I installed, as well as all the bands and all this that I had to actually undo to put the shroud around the pipe. But not too much trouble. Put the band back on, reinstall the shroud that I had unbolt there, and then tighten up the shroud in place so it's ready to go. Of course, I don't have the hoses to hook up to it yet.
All right, that looks great, and it fits in there exactly as I had planned. So my measurements turned out to be exactly right. My drawings were exactly right. There's not a lot of room in there to fit this, but it does in fact fit. So you can see it's clamped as a clamshell around this exhaust header here, and there's the clamps that keep that in place. Here is the outlet that has that restrictor in there, and the hose goes from there to where that valve is over there. That is not the valve that's going to be in there, but that is where it will be going to. The inlet is going to come from a blast tube just down here, right up around, and then up into, I think I hear that yak taking off. Where is he? No, I missed him. The inlet is going to come from a blast tube, just a SCAT tube that'll come up and around here, and then up to connect to the inlet, which is right up in there. I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's the inlet there. So it comes out of there and then down. So that's the inlet. So the air, cold air from outside, comes in the back, whereas that is the coldest part of the pipe, and as it moves forward, it gets hotter and hotter, encountering the hotter part of the pipe. And by the time it's got to the front, it's heated up the air substantially, and then that air will blow down to that vent down there. The vent itself will have it switching either from going into the cabin or up and around here, and then through a flange on the back of this baffle here, which will send hot air out this way. And the reason for that is that this is aluminum. the gases in here are 1700 degrees Fahrenheit, and this will melt if you don't have air flowing through it. So we need to have air flowing through there at all times, either into the cabin or overboard, which we'll send out over here, over top of the engine, away from the cylinder. So all of this is just area that hot air is coming out. So that's the plan.
Now I have to remove the old damper that is there because it's not going to function the way I need it to. And this fantastic shot showing the back of my head and my shirt instead of what I'm actually doing would show me trying to unscrew this when there are bolts on the inside that I can't get to. And I don't have someone else to hold the inside. So what I ended up doing was taking a wrench and using some painter's tape to tape the wrench in place on top of the bolt in a way that the wrench can't move so that I can unscrew from the outside, and it's kind of like the tape is my helper on the inside holding the bolt, the nut rather. So now I'm trying to figure out how exactly I'm going to fit this new stainless damper in place and which position. So I've pretty much decided this is the way it's going to go, and I've used some marker to mark in place where that's going to actually show up, and then transfer those marks to the inside because I'm going to drill it from the inside out. Here I am drilling from the inside through the firewall, the stainless firewall there for the new damper to fit. I've got the bolts in place and it's not quite right, so I'll go in and drill it one more time there. Now I've got the damper in place, and the same problem. I have to put nuts on the inside, but the bolts are themselves turning on the outside. So what I've done is I've put a wrench on the inside, taped again, holding those nuts, and I'm trying to turn the bolts. And you'll see finally in the last one, I can't get a wrench on the inside. So what I end up having to do is come around the outside, tape a wrench to the outside, and then go on the inside and use my socket to tighten the nut. And you'll see that just in a second here. Now here I can't get that one. It just isn't working. So now I go get the wrench, put it in place, tape it. You can see I've taped it there. And now that the wrench is going to hold, that's my helper. I'll go inside and tighten it up. So now the damper's in place. I got the second damper inside. This is the damper that's going to direct the hot air either to just the front seats or all four seats. Of course, we need to have a way of getting air into the heating duct. So let's have a look at the blast tube here. I'm going to hook onto that blast tube. I have to take the SCAT tubing I have here and make it rigid and so that I can fasten it. And here I'm doing some math. I'm actually calculating the radius, or actually circumference of a circle based on those SCAT tubes, so I know how long to cut these pieces of aluminum. I'm going to cut this aluminum brace, and then I'm going to bend it into a semicircle so that it will fit inside the duct. Then I will, I'll test that, make sure it's the right size for the duct, and then I can drill a hole inside the bracket that can be used to push a bolt through and fasten the end of that duct in place so that it will be held securely and won't move around. And I have to repeat this for each of the tubes that are going to be in, or each end of every tube, because they all have to be held in exactly the correct places. And of course, whenever you manufacture brackets like this, you have to make sure that they're filed all nice and smooth so there's no sharp edges. Now I'm drilling the holes in those brackets and making another semicircular bracket, just bending it on the vise there and fitting it to inside the tube. So this took quite a while, a lot of trial and error, just trying to get everything right. Once I've got the metal pieces inside, then I poke a hole through the side of the hose exactly where that hole is on the bracket so that I can get the tube in place. So here's the existing blast tube. I'm changing out what was in there was a half circle, and I'm changing it for a full circle because I'm going to use it to connect my next tube as well. So it's going to connect next to that tube. There's I was using my measuring tape, and I seem to have lost it. It's somewhere in my hanger. I don't know where I've put it. So now I've got to disconnect that tube from where it is so that I can get the new one in place connected to it. So now I've got that whole circle in the old tube, fastened it in place, and so I can get the new tube and then position it and then fasten it next to the blast tube that was already existing. The new tube has a half semicircle in it that doesn't need the full circle that I put in the new tube, and then I just put a bolt between the two, and it holds the two tubes there firmly next to one another, and they can't move because they're both fastened to a bracket. Now that I've got the other that tube fastened, I have to figure out where this is going to get routed up to the heat shroud, to the input of the heat shroud, because this is the blast tube that's going to take the air in. So that has to get then routed up into the back of the heat shroud, which is the cold part of the exhaust. We want to heat the cold air with the coldest part of the exhaust first, and then it'll move forward and gradually encounter hotter and hotter air and pick up even more and more heat. Okay, so I've got that tube in place and strapping it and making sure that it's going exactly where I want it to go. Now I'm working on the output from that heating shroud, and it is going directly into that duct, or the damper rather.
So you can see the old blast tube, which is this one right here, that runs up to cylinder 2, and that is to help cool cylinder 2. I've got a second blast tube that's picking up air from the NACA duct here, so it's going to get air blasted in the front of it right there, as you can see. Hopefully, if it's pointed the right direction. So I'm looking in the duct. From the front here, you can see the tube right there. So the air coming in here is going to hit that tube. So it will pressurize it. And then that gets blown all the way up into the heating shroud here. So you can see the hose, the SCAT tube comes up from there, around, and up here. It does make it a little difficult to get to the plug here, but I can push this aside and get to it. And if need be, I can always just unhook that. And that's why I put this this grip tie here. That is one of Mike Patey's removable and replaceable grip ties. You can just undo that, move this out of the way, and then when you're done, put it back on there. The problem I have is with the cooling of this cylinder. This one has the blast tube right there, that keeps it nice and cool. This is my hottest cylinder, and I've just made it worse by adding more impediments here to getting air to it. So what I'm going to do is put another blast tube, and it's, you see where it's going to go. This is the intake for the air filter for the engine, so it has ram air into the engine. I'm going to put another blast tube right up there, right above that. And it's going to feed out through here, up and around, and then up into the cooling fins of the cylinder, which you can sort of see up here in there. There's the cylinder cooling fin. So it's going to take air, blast it directly up onto that cylinder, and hopefully it will solve that. I mean, this one here, with the blast tube running on this cylinder, that is now my coldest cylinder as a result. So I'm hoping that that will do the same thing for here. This is my hottest cylinder, and that's my limiting cylinder. So that should take care of that problem. Okay, so we do have the air coming into the heat shroud here, comes out of the heat shroud over into the damper box. And then there's a damper here that I haven't hooked up yet that controls whether it's going into the cabin. So when it's like this, it's going into the cabin. When it's like that, it's going out here. And then I've got this restrictor. Now the reason for this is because this is aluminum and you need air moving through it at all times or else it gets too hot and can melt. So I need to have air flowing through it. If it's not going into the cabin, which is like this, so if it's like that, that hot air is going into the cabin, that's fine. If it's not going into the cabin, then it's going to be coming out of here. And then it has to go somewhere. And I can't put it in this area because this is my high pressure cold area, so I need to exhaust it overboard. I originally was going to cut a hole in the bottom cowling. You can see I have drawn a picture or a circle there where I was going to cut and put a flange on there. And so it was just going to come out of here and straight down and out. I think I've changed my mind on that. So I have put a restrictor in here because I don't want to lose a ton of cooling air just overboard as heat. And I don't need full blast of air moving through this when the cooling isn't occurring. So I put the restrictor in here in the outlet. And what I'm going to do is put this right angled piece here and go back to my original idea, which was to bring it up which was to bring it up here and around, and then cut a hole in the baffle here and exhaust it overboard right here, which goes out over the prop. And this is all low pressure hot air, so it's fine putting hot air here because it's already hot air. So that's the plan. However, I managed to leave that flange at home, so I can't plumb that in. I'll run the hose for it, but I can't finish it today, unfortunately. The other thing I do have to do is hook up the control cables so that from inside the cockpit I can open and close this damper. So that I want to try and get done today as well.
Now it needs to exhaust air out, so we've got that right angle on there with the restrictor, and that is going to take the air from the heat shroud when it is not going into the cabin and sending it overboard. So I want to be able to actuate these dampers, both the inside and the outside ones, from the cockpit. So here I'm replacing the old switch with a Bowden cable with a knob on the end, and there's already one there that was connected to the existing damper, so I'm using that to connect to that internal damper that you can see right there. Actually, you can't see anything. All you can see is the back of my vest here, and you can tell the date I'm doing this. It's quite cold because I'm wearing a down vest. Here is the Bowden cable that I am actually hooking up to that internal damper, and that will enable me to select whether the hot air is coming to all 4 seats or just the front seats, just by pulling the little cable actuator at the front, in between the 2 front seats there. So I'm just fastening everything in place. Let's give it a test and see how it works. So this is what it looks like when I'm actuating it from the front seats. Works great. Now I need a place for the hot air to come out. I am going to drill a hole in the baffling here to install the flange. Now I've got a hole cutter here that cut a 2-inch hole so that I can fasten the flange on here. Then I mark where the flange has holes and dimple and drill those holes. You can see my little trick using the painter's tape to catch the metal shavings so they don't fall everywhere in the engine where you don't want them to go. So now I'll deburr it with my deburring tool, put the flange in place, and fasten up the nuts and bolts. Just a little clean out of the holes there to make sure everything lines up, and it's done. Now, the damper itself, I thought it was a 1032 hole. I'm not sure what size hole it is, so I had to drill it out just a little bit to fit a proper bolt. Next, I'm installing the blast tube. If you look, there's a blast tube on the existing tube that was there before that takes blast air and sends it directly up into the cylinder that you can just see at the very top left of the image there. That is, as a result, my coolest cylinder. The hottest cylinder, and the one that limits my climb performance, is the one directly behind it. And I've made it worse by putting all these extra SCAT tubes in here for the heating system. So I am adding another blast tube just like the one of the cylinder that already had one. And that will just send a huge amount of air blasting directly up at that cylinder and hopefully solve those cooling issues with that one cylinder. And that's the hope anyway, because, well, I'm basing that on the fact that it fixed it for the cylinder in front of it. Here's hoping that it does the exact same thing. So I'm doing the same technique here where I'm putting the circles or the semicircles inside the blast tubes and then connected to a aluminum bracket that I manufactured on the outside to hold the tubes in place so that they can't move and they're always pointing the right way.
All right, all my hoses are done except for the very top one, which I'll do tomorrow. So as you can see, there's a whole rat's nest of SCAT tubing here. So if you recall, I said that cylinder 4 was hot, and so the previous owner added this blast tube here that takes air directly from the NACA duct and then brings it up and blasts it up onto cylinder 4 here. And that was great. That brought the temperature. That's now the coldest cylinder. This here, cylinder 2, is my hottest cylinder. So what I've done is added another one right up there. So as you can see, the air will come blasting in there. And here is the other cylinder. There's the one I just added. That is my heat input. So I've got 3 tubes taking air in from, along with the air box for the engine there, from the NACA duct. The one that I just added there comes up over top of here and then blasts right up into the cylinder fins there that you probably can't see. You can sort of see right there. You can see the cylinder cooling fins there. So that blast tube points at that. The other input tube comes up over here into the heating shroud, comes down out of here, hot air, into the damper. And then there's a damper lever here. Goes on and off. If it's off, then it goes out here and then up to there. If it's on, then it goes into the cabin. So if it is off, then it will come up here through this duct and then exhaust out this flange that I just mounted, which then comes out here over top of the engine and then out. So close to being done. I have to hook up this hose here. I got another 90 angle fitting for there and forgot to bring it with me. So that's not getting done tonight. And the other thing I have to do is run the control cable for this duct. So I've got it inside. I need to find a way to route it out here and hook it up so that it will actuate that damper from inside the airplane. But that's it. And that's all that's left on the heating and cooling project.
Back on the exhaust, I finally got the right angle piece that I had forgotten at home bolted in place and with a strap to hold it, and then feed up the tube that's going to be going to it. I do need to then set a couple standoffs for that tube so that it doesn't rub against anything and doesn't get in the way of anything else. With that finished, let's get back to the damper. I'm putting on a little saddle on a pivot that connects to the damper arm, and that will allow us to connect the Bowden cable to the damper, and it will then pivot on the damper arm and allow it to push without straining on the cable. So this is about the last that I'm going to do on this day. I think the next day will be the final day for this. And here is the next day. You can see I just drilled and pushed through the control cable from the inside. Now I have to route this. And this was a lot of work deciding and planning. I first tried to use a right angle bracket. That's not going to work. So then I go back and manufacture just a straight bracket with a little bit of a bend in it, using the trick here to put on these Adel clamps with a little bit of a stainless lock wire. Then there you can see my little bracket. And the bracket is going to hold the Bowden cable in a position such that it will then point directly at the saddle that is connected to that damper arm. So that when you pull the knob inside, it will pull the damper arm back and forth on that damper and open and close it. Or at least in theory, that's what should happen. Now, this was a lot of trial and error. I had to move things around and change them, and I had to rebend the bracket, and it actually went on and off several times, which I'm not bothering to include here, but you're basically getting the idea that this took a lot of time to get it right, because I wanted to make sure there was no strain and bend on the cable that was going to cause it to fatigue, and also that the cable was not going to bend and rub against plug wires or fuel lines, which are right around there as well. So I'm being very, very careful about what I'm doing here. So now that it's in place, let's give it a try working it from inside the plane. And you can see there's closed, open, and it works very well. I'm very pleased with this.
And there is my heating. So, heat off, heat on, heat off, backseat heat on, or actually no, backseat heat off, backseat heat on. So it's defaulting to on. If I don't want a backseat heat, then I just pull that out. Heat on, heat off. Hopefully, that's going to solve all the heating issues. We've got hoses in here. I do think I'm going to probably put another hose on there. Right now, it's just kind of blowing into the backseat area. I may put another hose and put it down by the feet. We'll see how it goes. I do have cleanup to do. Obviously, it's a total mess back here. I've got dirty footprints and dust and shavings and all kinds of stuff everywhere. But it's done. I can't believe I'm saying it, but the heating project is complete. Never thought I'd see this day. Some days, anyway. So, only thing left to do is landing gear and propeller, and I think that's it. Is that it? Wow. I might be actually able to fly my airplane again soon. Okay, well, thanks for coming along on this very long trip with me. I hope you weren't too bored and had some kind of interest in what I was doing and found this interesting. educational. If you have any questions, comments, suggestions, please leave them in the comments section below. And really, if you could just click like and then subscribe to the channel, it would really help me out. Really want this channel to grow. And if you do that, it makes it grow all that much faster because it shows the content that I have to other people who have the same interests as you, which is obviously airplanes, because you're watching this all the way to the end. Thanks for watching.